Good morning, students. Now we discuss section 25, subsection 3, relating to voluntary registration of businessmen. If a businessman is not liable to be registered under section 22 or section 24, but if he wants to, then he may get himself registered voluntary. Now, in the case of voluntary registration, all the provisions of this act will be applicable to him. Now, what is the benefit or advantage to him? The advantage is the supplier of goods or service or both will get input tax credit on purchases made by him, and he will be able to enhance its business to business transactions as a business units, because most of the big companies prefer to purchase goods or hire services from registered persons only. But advantage is there and simultaneously disadvantage is also there. The voluntary registration creates the liability to him to pay GST on outward supplies made by him, even if his turnover is below the specified limit of 40 lakhs or 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs as the case may be. Now question arises, if a person has taken voluntary registration, then whether he can get its registration cancelled subsequently. So yes, he can get his registration cancelled subsequently if he is not covered under section 22 or 24 later on. Earlier there was a limit of 1 year for getting cancellation of the voluntary registration, but after notification dated 23rd January 2018, notification number 3/18, this 1 year limitation is now removed. So some people also take voluntary registration. Then we come to section 26, which is deemed registration. Basically this is an provision that if a person is registered under State GST Act, then it shall be deemed he is also registered under Central GST Act. Or if a person is registered under UT GST Act, then it shall be deemed that he is also granted registration under CGST Act. That means he has to apply only at one place, not both at central level and state level. Now, similar, there is deemed rejection or deemed cancellation provision. If a registration is cancelled under State GST Act or UT GST Act, then it shall be deemed that the registration has been rejected under CGST Act also, or cancelled under CGST Act also. Then we come to suo motu registration by the proper officer, section 25 subsection 8. Now sometimes proper officer founds that there is a businessman who is dealing in goods and he is dealing in turnover which is beyond the specified limit for which registration should be there, but that businessman is not getting his business registered. Then this finding will be on the basis of any survey or inquiry or inspection or search or any other proceeding under the act. Then the proper officer may register such person on temporary basis and issue him an order of registration in the form GST Reg 12. Now the effective date of registration will be the date of such order. Now, when such person is notified about that he has been registered by the proper GST officer, then he has two choices: either to accept the order and start making payment of GST accordingly on his sales and supplies. But if he does not accept the order of registration, then he should file an appeal against such temporary registration, and that appeal should be filed with the uh, appellate authority within the specified period of 30 days. Now, if the appellate authority upholds the liability to registration, then the application for registration should be submitted by such businessman within 30 days from the date of issue of such order of the appellate tribunal. So, the businessman who is registered by a GST officer on its own motion may either comply with the order or he may dispute the order and file an appeal with the appellate authority. And if the appellate authority, that is the appellate tribunal, upholds the registration, then he has to file all the documents for registration. Or if the appellate tribunal cancels the order of the GST officer, then the registration shall be deemed to be cancelled accordingly. Then we come to section 23, persons who are not liable to registration, who are not required to be registration. So there are two sections in it. One is section 23(1) and second is section 23 subsection 2. First we discuss section 23 subsection 1 of the CGST Act. So as per this section, two type of persons are exempted from registration. Number one is any person engaged exclusively in the business of supplying goods or services or both that are not liable to tax, or they are wholly exempt from the tax under this act and under IGST Act. So if your goods and services are not covered under CGST Act or IGST Act, and a person is doing business of supplying only those goods and services, then such person is not required to be registered even if his turnover is above the specified limit. For example, a person who is dealing in alcoholic liquor for human consumption, which is outside the purview of GST, then he is not required to be registered under GST. But if he is supplying other goods which are taxable under GST, then obviously he is required to be registered. And second category of persons who are exempted under section 23(1) are agriculturists. So those persons who are doing agricultural operations, or they are making production of agricultural products through cultivation of land, then they are exempted. Now under section 2 subsection 7 of the agriculturist is defined. It means an individual or Hindu undivided family who undertakes cultivation of land by their own labor or by the labor of the family or by the servants on wages payable in cash or kind, or by hired labor under personal supervision or under personal supervision of any member of the family. So these two type of persons are exempted under section 23 subsection 1. Then we come to section 23 subsection 2. Now following under section 23 subsection 2, different category of persons are exempted from registration. So these are basically the those persons which are granted exemption by a notification of the government by the GST Council. If you see that notification number 5 of 2017, notification number 10 of 2017, notification number of 3 of 2019, so some small businessmen are exempted under section 23(2). So basically 23(2) is a power given to the government to exempt small category of persons from the registration provisions. So let us discuss these notifications. Number 1, persons making only reverse charge supplies. Like I given earlier example that advocates are not required to be registered due to this notification. The persons who are getting services of advocates are required to make payment of GST under reverse charge. Second category is persons making interstate supplies of taxable services up to rupees 20 lakhs. Number 3 is persons making interstate taxable supply of notified handicraft goods up to rupees 20 lakhs. Then fourth is casual taxable persons making interstate taxable supplies of notified handicraft goods up to rupees 20 lakhs. Fifth category is persons making supplies of services through an electronic commerce operator with aggregate turnover up to rupees 20 lakhs. Then sixth is job workers engaged in making interstate supply of services. Then seventh is services provided by the commission agent for sale or purchase of agricultural produce. And eighth is suppliers of goods having aggregate turnover not exceeding rupees 40 lakhs in specified states. Then we come to time period for making application for registration. Section 25 subsection 1. So here number 1 situation is when you are taking voluntary registration, then there is no time limit. You can apply anytime if you are not covered under section 22 or 24. Second is if you are covered under section 24 as CTP, casual taxable person, or NRTP, non-resident taxable person, then you have to take registration at least 5 days prior to starting supply of goods or services at that place. And if you are going to take normal registration under section 24 or 22 other than CTP and NRTP, then your time limit is 30 days from the date of starting supply of goods or services. Now where you are required to take application for registration? So the place of business where you want to operate your office, your business, in that state you are required to get registration. If you are making supplies from outside India, then you have to take registration in that state or union territory where the nearest point of appropriate baseline is located. Now question arises, if you have different branches in different cities in the same state, then how many registration you required? In that case, if your business operations are limited to any number of cities but in a same state, then only one registration is required. If you are doing different business activities in the same state, then also only one registration is required. But if you are carrying business, you are making supplies from different states or from different cities in different states, then you are required to take a registration in each of such state where your business is located. But you have option. If you have two or three type of business in same city or in same state, then you have choice. Either you take one registration or you can take different registration for each type of business. It is also allowed. Or you can take registration for each separate place of business in same state. But it will be always better to take only one registration, because your compliances will be as many number of times as many you have registrations in the state. Now this registration is PAN based. You should have a permanent account number. On the basis of that PAN number, GST number is issued. So in case of those persons who are non-residents, taxable persons, or who are operating from outside India, in that case they have to submit other documents like passport or their unique identification number in that particular country for the purpose of registration.